It all starts on an average commute where our guy is asking the real questions, wondering why every piece of media these days feels so mass-produced. He fires the thought into a chat AI app and rolls his eyes when the bot spits back a generic copy-paste response, but then it drops a cynical truth bomb, claiming that originality is dead because the world has changed, and people only want the safe, familiar thrills of a story where the answers come easy. It's a bleak reality check about the state of modern entertainment. As Dojin stands on the crowded bus, he realizes that while the rest of the world might be moving on, his own life is completely stagnant. Every single day is just the same featureless scenery, and the exact same exhausting routine, leaving our hero staring blankly ahead, wondering if graduating will actually change anything or if he's already hit a dead end. His gloomy inner monologue gets interrupted when a long-haired girl leans in to tease him about being glued to his phone. And when he actually manages to stammer out her name, Yui Han looks surprised he even knows who she is. Back then, she was the kind of popular classmate who was always surrounded by a crowd of friends. And though she was apparently a huge deal on social media, our disconnected guy barely even noticed. Dojin bluntly asks why she's even bothering to talk to him, and when Yui shoves her screen in his face, he assumes she's asking for his digits. It turns out she just wants to borrow a portable charger, but he shoots her down, prompting the girl to complain that holding a conversation with him is suffocating. She asks if she struck a nerve while he just repeats that he doesn't have a battery, and her amused laughter only manages to irritate him more. Yui leans in close and calls him out. Knowing he thought she was hitting on him, she keeps pushing to see if his heart was fluttering at the idea of a pretty girl making a move, but our boy just sighs and asks why she won't leave him alone. She pouts that he's boring to be around, so he tunes her out and asks Chat AI how he can break out of his monotonous routine. The AI instantly suggests taking a trip, and when he points out that's a bit much for a student, the system promises a getaway is a lot simpler than he thinks. He mutters that he'd never go unless he was literally forced, and the app ominously questions his resolve. A new message pops up telling him he's leaving right now, and before he can even process what that means, the bus driver lets out a confused shout, because a massive glowing blue portal has just ripped open in the middle of the street, swallowing the entire vehicle. The windows violently shatter inward, throwing Dojin and Yui into absolute chaos as the world around them collapses. Everything goes pitch black until a single system window glows in the void, announcing that Chat AI is activating. Dojin is left lying motionless on the floor of the wrecked bus, but a moment later his eyes snap open, and he groans as he pushes himself upright into the debris. He clutches his throbbing head, trying to piece together the memory of that giant object looming in the street, only for Yui to chime in unprompted to announce she's fine. A status update our boy coldly brushes off. She starts to snap back at him, but their bickering is instantly cut short by a blood-curdling scream. A trembling woman at the front of the aisle frantically waves the rest of the survivors over, and as they gather around, pure terror washes over their faces. Dojin flinches at the gruesome sight. The driver has been impaled by a massive log that smashed straight through the windshield. Our guy immediately shouts for someone to call an ambulance, but Yui holds up her screen to reveal they have zero signal. Panic erupts through the cabin as a heavy-set passenger demands to know where they are, staring out the shattered windows in disbelief at the towering trees outside because instead of a highway, their wrecked bus is now stranded deep in an unknown foggy forest. A muscular man in a green jacket steps up to take charge. He grimly acknowledges the driver's fate, then urges the panicked survivors to calm down and face reality. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, trying to wrap their heads around crashing in the middle of a city and waking up in a dense woodland. And a quick check of their phones confirms the worst. 0 bars across the board. With the harsh reality of their isolation setting in, the self-appointed leader points out that the woods are going to get incredibly dangerous once the sun fully sets. He suggests the able-bodied adults form a scouting party to check the immediate area, and though a guy in a gray hoodie whines about wanting to stay put, the leader quickly reassures him they won't go far, which prompts a handful of other passengers to eagerly volunteer for the search. The muscular man lays down the law, ordering the remaining survivors to stay glued to the wrecked bus and not wander off under any circumstances, leaving Yui seriously impressed by his calm handling of the nightmare, while our boy Dojin just hopes the guy comes back with a rescue squad. Our boy turns to check on Yui, asking if she took any damage when they cracked heads during the fall, but she brushes it off with a grin and claims her skull is hard as a rock right before a sudden string of curses cuts them off. The yelling comes from a blonde, heavily tattooed guy who is absolutely losing his mind over his dead phone, while the short-haired girl next to him tries to shush him. The other survivors immediately start gossiping about the odd duo. They recognize the loudmouth as Jianwu Kong, a notorious high schooler rumored to run illegal gigs with local gangsters, which makes it completely baffling that he'd be tied to Lia Yun, the academy's squeaky clean model student. But a quick cutaway to them crossing paths on the bus earlier proves this unlikely duo definitely goes way back. Jianwu snaps at the whispers, demanding to know what everyone's looking at while Lia desperately tries to hold him back. Dojin just points to himself in mock confusion, and Yui happily films the meltdown for her socials. The tattooed thug gets right in his face to bark out a classic aggressive demand to know if our boy recognizes him, which our guy shuts down instantly by asking if he's supposed to be some kind of celebrity. Jianwu glares daggers at the disrespect, but Dojin meets the stare without even blinking. Lia finally manages to drag the hothead away before he can swing, forcing him to drop the argument. Yui playfully taps our boy on the shoulder, thanking him for being such a solid backrest, before complaining about the blonde hothead's serious anger issues, which Dojin figures is just because the cell network is completely dead. He checks his own screen to confirm the out-of-service warning, but then his eyes go wide and he starts sweating bullets as Yui leans in to ask what's wrong. He stares at the dead signal bars in disbelief, realizing that somehow the chat AI app is still perfectly online and asking if he needs assistance. Meanwhile, deeper in the woods, a sharp wooden stake carves a deep gouge into a tree trunk. The guy in the gray hoodie asks what's going on, and the muscular leader explains he's leaving trail markers so they don't get lost. He warns that it's way too easy to get completely turned around in the dark, prompting the group to ask how he knows so much, and the man casually drops that he used to serve in the special forces. Years ago, he thought all that hardcore tactical training was just a waste of time, never expecting those exact skills would be the only thing keeping them alive today. He tries to keep morale high, telling the group they'll definitely be rescued and that he's just worried about his girlfriend waiting for him, but internally, the realization claws at him that these massive glowing plants are completely alien. Shoving the dread aside, he decides their only option is to press on and trust that search teams are already scouring the area. While the guy in the gray hoodie mutters about how crazy it is to survive a bus crash only to end up stranded in the dark, suddenly, the leader stops in his tracks, pointing through the trees as he spots something up ahead, and the men freeze as they realize it's a person hiding in the tall grass, staring back at them with a wide, unblinking smile. Meanwhile, the moon shines down through the canopy over the crashed bus, and a pale light falls over the exhausted passengers as they try to sleep, huddled together in the pitch-black cabin. Dojin taps away at his screen, desperate to make sense of the nightmare, and asks the AI if there's any way it can bypass the dead zone to call for a rescue. The system coldly replies that it can't make calls and offers up survival guidelines instead. But our boy ignores the advice, struck by a sudden realization the app shouldn't even be functioning without a network connection. When he asks how it's online, Chat AI drops a bombshell: it's running on Mana. The system casually announces they are currently on the Karman continent, confirming that the passengers just got isekai'd into a literal otherworld. Dojin stares at the screen in total disbelief. He tries to wrap his head around the insane lore dump, but his spiraling thoughts are cut short when Yui stands up to leave the bus, and he asks where she's headed. She blushes and awkwardly admits she just needs to find a bathroom. Fed up with the awkward tension, Yui loudly announces to the whole bus that she needs to step outside to use the bathroom, and he warns Yui not to wander off as he heads down the aisle, a clueless command she immediately brushes off. Before she can head out herself, a voice calls out, and Leah leans forward from her seat, offering to tag along. Yui admits that it's dark outside and she'd feel better with some company, and playfully snaps a sudden flash selfie of them together. But when she asks to swap socials, the total lack of cell service quickly brings her back to reality. The wholesome moment is instantly ruined by Jianwu Kong, who groans that their friendly act is annoying the hell out of him, prompting our boy Dojin to step up and throw the tattooed hothead's earlier words right back in his face. Jianwu violently lunges forward to make him pay, but Leah jumps between the two guys before fists can fly. Yui just sighs at the pointless macho drama. She ignores them completely and pulls up her phone's flashlight app, shining the bright LED straight out into the pitch-black woods, only for the beam to catch a pale, wide-eyed man staring right back at her through the glass. The back of the bus erupts into screams, but Jianwu just yells at the window, thinking the scouting party is pulling a sick prank. Hearing the commotion, Dojin asks if the guys are back, only for Yui to shove her phone screen in his face, and the screen shows the pale, grinning freak caught in the glare. Our boy freezes, staring at the terrifying sight in shock. Because that isn't just some guy standing outside the glass, it's a massive moth monster with a human head, its insectoid legs crawling over the metal frame. The creature rears back and slams a spiky limb into the window, shattering the glass completely to open a way inside. And it's not alone. Another winged shadow dives straight at the bus, and the glass cracks under the impact as the trapped passengers back away in terror. Our guy watches in shock as Chat AI finally chimes in, throwing up a notification to identify the swarm as Chan-Chans, dropping some absolutely horrifying lore that these moth-type monsters are born headless and need to steal one to survive. And right now, human heads are their absolute favorite target as they swarm the bus to claim fresh replacements. One of the creatures violently headbutts the cracked window while the AI casually notes that it just provided a brief summary of the threat, and more of the beasts slam their skulls against the glass, not even caring when their own blood splatters across the pane. A third monster smashes its face into the barrier with a sickening, creepy smile, as the AI acknowledges how hard it must be to adapt to this nightmare. The system promises it can help him survive this hellscape and asks if he wants to make a deal, but Dojin completely ignores the prompt, screaming at the top of his lungs for someone to turn off the lights before the swarm breaks through. But the warning comes a second too late as a woman frantically fumbles with her glowing phone, and the human-faced moths shatter the glass, pouring into the bus like an absolute nightmare. One of the creatures immediately snatches a man in its spiked legs, while another grabs a woman from behind, her screams echoing through the aisle. A monstrous beast with a toothy maw on its chest pins a teenager down, and as the boy desperately tries to push the scaly appendage away, a spiked tail violently pierces the monster's head from behind, obliterating it in a brutal one-shot. Dojin and Yui can only stare in stunned silence as blood rains down around them, with the boy's lifeless body left hanging upside down like a grim trophy. The sheer reality of the massacre finally sinks in for our guy, and absolute panic erupts through the bus as the remaining passengers scramble for the exit. Leah bursts into tears, completely overwhelmed by the nightmare. But before anyone can intervene, another human-faced moth monster lunges forward and snatches a woman in its sharp claws, and she cries out in helpless despair, certain this is the end. But Jianwu steps in and violently smashes a heavy fire extinguisher straight into the beast's face. The bloody cylinder drops to the floor with a heavy thud, and outside the situation is just as doomed, with the armored man from the scouting party lying dead in the dirt, impaled by a massive blade. Back inside, Jianwu grabs Leah by the wrist, aggressively barking at her to shut up, and he drags the terrified schoolgirl away from the looming shadows. He yells at the rest of the paralyzed passengers that this is their only chance to run, so while the swarm of beasts is distracted by the slaughter, the remaining survivors finally make a desperate break for the woods. Our boy leads the desperate sprint into the thick of the dark woods where Leah collapses in the brush to muffle her terrified sobs, only for Jianwu to coldly tell her to pull herself together, sparking a cigarette like nothing even happened. The panic is contagious, and a man in a white shirt starts screaming at the top of his lungs. He demands answers from the group, completely oblivious to the danger of his own volume. Yui crouches in the shadows to warn him that his shouting will bring the swarm right back down on them, but the guy just takes offense, snapping at the teenager for daring to disrespect an adult. Jianwu is already annoyed by the bickering and barks at the pair to shut up, but he quickly turns his irritation onto our boy, demanding he put away his useless phone during a monster attack. Dojin completely ignores the tattooed thug to read a new system notification that confirms his escape from the swarm, though the relief is short-lived when Chat AI drops a grim warning that the creatures track any trace of human scent. That prompt makes our hero realize the cigarette dangling from Jianwu's mouth is basically a massive neon beacon. So when the older man steps up to demand some respect, Dojin cuts him off with an icy glare, warning the thug to put the smoke out unless he wants his head ripped off. Jianwu's eyes go wide at the sheer disrespect, but before he can swing, the man with glasses steps between them, pointing out that Dojin is actually right about the tracking risk. He tries to talk the group down, acknowledging that everyone is completely on edge, and reminds the terrified survivors that they were just waiting for a rescue team when this nightmare started. Trying to play the leader, he insists they need to stop fighting and work together if they want to live, a sentiment echoed by a woman who desperately begs for unity, until her speech is violently cut short as a massive Chan-Chan drops out of the night sky. The rest of the swarm immediately descends to trap the terrified survivors in the clearing, but the man with glasses desperately tries to keep the panic at bay and swears they are still fine. He orders everyone to stay low and push deeper into the thick woods, convinced the creatures are too slow to catch them, until he turns around and finds one of the winged freaks already blocking his path. He stares up in stunned disbelief, and the monster's human face twists into a sickening grin as it mocks his little theory about their speed. But before the freak can strike, a brutal punch flies out of nowhere to shatter the tension, as an absolute unit of a green orc steps in and cleaves the Chan-Chan's head clean off. The severed head hits the grass with a heavy thud, and the massive brute roars in savage triumph, its weapon already dripping with fresh blood. Suddenly, the woods are swarming with them, and another orc viciously slashes into a chan-chan, while a female warrior joins the fray to impale the insectoid beast from below with her spear. The human survivors can only watch in paralyzed horror as the brutal slaughter unfolds, and the man with glasses stands completely frozen, forced to listen to the visceral sounds of monsters being torn apart. A severed chan-chan head hits the dirt, and the two towering orcs stand victorious over their gruesome trophies. The survivors breathe a collective sigh of relief as they realize these new arrivals just saved them from the swarm. But the greenskin warriors quickly spot the group cowering in the brush. Trying to play the diplomat, the man with glasses steps forward with his hands raised to show they're unarmed, and without a single second of hesitation, the orc swings its blade, splitting him right down the middle. Splattered in fresh blood, the brute coldly declares they have nothing to discuss with humans. Jianwu instantly steps up to body block the girls, warning them to brace for whatever broken isekai magic these monsters might pull out next. The green-skinned brutes close in on the defenseless survivors, taunting them for wandering into the woods unarmed, and Jianwu breaks into a cold sweat as he realizes they have absolutely no way to fight back. A towering monster raises a blood-soaked hammer behind Jianwu to deliver the killing blow, but the executioner freezes when a sudden voice cuts through the tension. Our boy steps up to the front line, holding his smartphone out as the app translates his words into a monstrous rumble. The raiding party is completely stunned to hear a human speaking their native tongue, and Yui and Leah can only stare in utter disbelief as Dojin keeps his cool, formally addressing the warriors and asking them to lower their weapons. Sometime later, the comic cuts to a quiet orc encampment under the night sky, where the tribe's leader glares down at his men in absolute disappointment. Two heavily bandaged warriors sit nearby, hanging their heads in shame over their humiliating defeat to the chan-chans, while a superior officer grills a subordinate about the security of a highly guarded prize. Inside one of the tents, a lone guard stands watch over a massive wooden chest. He swears that the prize locked inside was bought with the blood of their brothers and must be delivered safely to the chief. Out in the open, the human captives kneel in the dirt with their wrists tightly bound, as a pair of nearby orcs gossip in disbelief about the strange prisoner who somehow spoke their native tongue. They figure his clean-cut look and rare linguistic skills mean he must be some kind of human nobility, while Yui leans in to whisper to our boy, desperately asking if he's using a translation app to understand them. But the panic sets in as she realizes his hands are tidally bound behind his back, meaning he can't even reach his device to save them. The grunts on guard duty brush off the problem, agreeing that deciding the captive's fate is way above their pay grade, as a heavy voice echoes through the camp, declaring that humans are their eternal enemies and the choice belongs to their leader. Heavy footsteps crunch against the dirt as Vice Chief Targon steps into the firelight, resting a massive metal axe on his shoulder. The hulking orc stops and looms menacingly over Dojin, demanding to know if the rumors are true and this puny human actually speaks the language of warriors. Our hero just looks up at him, keeping his mouth shut and his expression perfectly tense, which prompts the Vice Chief to tighten his grip on his weapon, scoffing that he never believed the gossip from the start. He hoists the massive blade high to execute the captive, condemning all humans as nothing but skilled liars. But my guy just smirks up at the executioner and whispers a single word: synchronization. Just moments ago in the dark woods, Dojin had asked the AI to explain exactly what that feature meant. The system revealed that they could use the ambient mana to share thoughts directly, completely eliminating the need for a physical screen, a massive buff to his survival odds. With his battery on life support and capture imminent, the teen realized he didn't have the luxury of choice, so he gave the mental green light just as the ropes were tied around his wrists, and the synchronization successfully locked in the second he was forced to the dirt. Targon's massive axe begins its deadly descent, but Chatai's voice now rings crystal clear inside Dojin's head, and without missing a beat, our guy stares death in the face to mentally request the language module. A flawless Orkush greeting spills from his lips, stopping the executioner dead in his tracks. Sweating but keeping his composure, Dojin flatters the glorious warrior of the earth and begs the towering brute to lower the weapon so they can actually negotiate. But Targon couldn't care less. He brings his massive weapon down to crush another captive's skull into the dirt, and snarls that just because a human can speak their tongue doesn't mean they get to live. He points the dripping blade right at Yui, declaring she's next on the chopping block, and looms over the terrified girl to demand exactly what kind of people they are. As our hero watches the carnage in horror, a system window pings to remind him that orcs despise humanity more than anything. But the app adds a crucial detail: knowing exactly how these monsters operate is the only way to survive this nightmare. And as the Vice Chief readies his axe for the killing blow, Chat AI asks Dojin if he wants the secret to saving Yui's life. The system pings Dojin, and orders our hero to repeat its exact words. Just as Targon brings his massive blood-soaked blade down toward Yui's neck, Yui squeezes her eyes shut and screams the word Tahamanku, and Dojin follows up, declaring to the entire camp that they are the descendants of that very name. The vice chief freezes to listen, and another warrior nods in stunned recognition of the sacred title. Our guy holds his breath, terrified the bluff is about to fail, until Targon suddenly drops to one knee. The rest of the captives are left completely bewildered by the sudden bow, while Jianwu realizes that single word holds absolute power over these monsters. For a brief glorious second it looks like they might actually survive the night, and Yui realizes Dojin just saved their lives. But then the heavy-set man completely misreads the room, screaming the sacred word at the top of his lungs as he foolishly demands the green bastards untie them immediately. Targon's expression instantly darkens as he corrects the idiot, and Dojin listens in horror as the vice chief reveals the brutal truth. The tribe didn't bow to serve them, they only knelt out of respect for the ancient ancestors who sacrificed their lives in silence. Targon glares down at the trembling captives, concluding they're nothing but cheap fakes, and immediately barks the order to slaughter the whole lot. But before the blades can fall, the large man in the purple shirt freezes at a sickening crunch echoing through the trees, looking up in utter confusion before his eyes widen in absolute terror as an orc sword clatters uselessly to the grass. A horrifying Chan-Chan monster suddenly drops from the canopy and sinks its teeth right into an orc's neck, and another warrior screams in alarm as the camp erupts into total chaos. A massive swarm of the flying abominations descends from the night sky to ambush them. But the orcs aren't defenseless. One of the brutes violently cleaves an insectoid freak in half, sending its creepy human-like head flying. He roars that mere bugs are no match for the proud warriors of the earth, and the rest of the squad charges headfirst into the swarm, their eyes glowing with bloodlust. In the middle of the bloodbath, Yui spots a discarded blade and screams for Dojin. And our boy doesn't waste a second, snatching the weapon to slice through his own bindings before quickly cutting her loose too. But before he can move on to the rest, Chat AI suddenly pings his screen with an urgent alert, warning him that it's picking up the signal of an awakened trait right nearby. And while Jianwu barks at him to hurry up and cut his ropes, the system interface drowns the blonde guy out to explain the trait's massive value. The app insists this is a fated encounter that could absolutely guarantee his survival in this hellhole. Nearby, Yui frantically struggles to untie the knots of the other passengers, and Leah sobs her thanks when the older girl finally frees her, while that same heavy-set man is still yelling at everyone to give him special treatment and free him first. Yui ignores the loudmouth and turns around to ask Dojin for the knife, but she only finds the discarded blade lying in the grass, as the heavy-set man shrieks about where the bastard went because our boy has already dipped into the woods. Deep in the woods, Dojin tracks the signal to a locked wooden chest, panting heavily after his dead sprint away from the slaughter, and asks the system if this is the prize it promised. Chat AI confirms it, reminding him that the raiding party they met earlier was already covered in wounds. The app deduces the monsters likely bled to secure this exact crate for their great chief, meaning whatever is inside is an incredibly valuable awakened trait. Dojin pops the heavy lock, and the interface officially welcomes him to the Carmen continent. The AI warns him that the only way to survive this brutal world is to gather power, and inside the chest rests his ticket to doing exactly that, a massive glowing fleshy organ called an ogre's heart. The system explains that these beasts are near calamitous threats, and consuming their core will grant him overwhelming physical strength. Our boy lifts the glowing prize, but Chat AI immediately drops a massive red flag, warning him that eating this thing could straight up kill him. The system explains that the organ is a crystal of pure mana that will violently reconstruct his entire body from the inside out. The sheer agony alone has a high chance of sending him into fatal shock. So Dojin stares down at the bloody mass in silence to weigh his options. A massive orc would smash him to pieces if he stays weak, and he knows the monsters in this forest will kill him anyway. With a desperate vow to survive, our boy takes a huge bite out of the raw flesh. Blood drips onto the grass as he forces it down, but instantly, his eyes shoot wide open in shock and he collapses backward onto the dirt, coughing up a mouthful of blood. Chat AI announces that his body is absorbing the pure mana, and the agonizing reconstruction process begins to rip his muscles apart from the inside. The system warns him that he has to stay conscious through the torment. Dojin screams in blind agony as the interface urges him to push through. Targon demands a status report. A subordinate confirms the Chan-Chan swarm has been completely wiped out. The orc warriors suffered 0 casualties in the skirmish. So the vice chief scoffs at the lowly bugs and immediately asks about the human captives. The answer is Jianwu, who pants heavily as he grips a massive stolen sword, completely exhausted and drenched in sweat. Despite the fatigue, he stands his ground to shield the terrified survivors huddled behind him, and when Leah calls out his name, he barks at her to shut her mouth and stay back. The surrounding orcs are actually impressed by his endurance, noting that the human clearly lacks any formal combat training. Targon steps forward to acknowledge the boy's true warrior heart, and out of respect the vice chief orders his men to execute him with proper etiquette, prompting a bald warrior to bring a heavy blade crashing down against the teen's desperate block. Jianwu struggles to hold the block, his hands going completely numb against the monster's raw power, before the bald warrior follows through with a heavy horizontal axe swing. The blonde teen barely manages to parry the downward strike that comes next, but the sheer kinetic energy is just too much for a normal human body to handle, and his stolen blade is ripped right out of his grasp, sent flying to embed itself in the dirt out of reach. Left completely defenseless, Jianwu can only grit his teeth and curse his own weakness. The hulking orc raises its weapon to deliver the killing blow, but before the blade can fall, a sudden blur of motion decapitates the beast in a violent spray of blood. Jianwu stares up in absolute shock, and the rest of the warband freezes in their tracks, unable to process what they just witnessed, because standing victorious over the collapsing corpse is our boy Dojin, casually wielding a bloody sword. The monsters are stunned that a supposedly weak human could instantly execute one of their elite. But as Dojin turns his attention to Targon, the vice chief's eyes go wide with a horrifying realization, confirmed the second the teen flashes a sinister blood-spattered smile and taunts that the meal was delicious. Targon remembers the glowing ogre's heart resting in its chest, the very prize his tribe led to secure. Pure fury washes over the vice chief's face, and he screams that the human ate their prize before bringing down a devastating overhead strike. Dojin barely manages to block the heavy blow, and he mentally asks Chat AI for his odds of actually winning this fight. The system bluntly informs him his chances are sitting at a desperate 10%, and as Targon's crushing strength forces our boy down to his knees, he begs to know if there's any way to raise those odds. Sent sliding backward across the dirt, Dojin pivots his strategy to ask the app for any tactical advantage regarding the orc race. Chat AI reveals that these monsters despise humanity because they were once enslaved by them, and are incredibly easy to provoke, which is all Dojin needs to hear to thank the system and grip his bloody katana with a new plan forming in his head. He stands tall despite his injuries, casually taunting the warriors for getting so touchy over some stolen food, before dropping the ultimate insult, asking if they're acting up because they weren't whipped enough back when they were slaves. The jab hits its mark perfectly, and Targon charges forward in a blind rage, but Dojin just smirks as the system pings to confirm he struck a massive nerve. The window chimes in to announce that the vice chief's blind fury is going to completely tank his combat performance, and as the massive orc swings his axe in a wild sloppy arc, our boy easily dodges the strike, his odds of surviving this nightmare finally shooting through the roof. Years ago, a simple high school questionnaire asked Dojin to write down his dream, but our boy just stared blankly at the paper, his mind completely empty. A classmate leaned over to joke that he was going to burn a hole through the desk, and asked if he seriously didn't have a single aspiration in life. The rest of the class was busy bragging about their own ridiculous goals, like running illegal sports betting rings, and teasing each other about being broke and directionless. But they all agreed Dojin was the weirdest one, since he stayed glued to his Chat AI app instead of living in the real world, until one friend tried to reassure him that he'd figure out his purpose eventually. A more recent memory shows him dressed in a sharp suit, reflecting on that exact conversation. And while he might not have found a grand, poetic dream, he definitely found a goal. And right now, as his stolen blade clashes against Targon's massive axe, that goal is pure, unadulterated survival. So when our guy frantically asks the system how to actually win this fight, Chat AI shuts him down with a flat denial. The massive orc unleashes a lethal horizontal swing that Dojin barely leans under, while the AI clarifies that provoking the beast's blind rage only increased his odds of staying alive. As Targon's weapon shatters the earth where our hero just stood, the system confirms his chances of winning a straight duel are absolute zero, leaving Dojin to desperately block a heavy upward strike and beg for a lifeline. Chat AI points out that the massive orc is favoring an injured knee, leaving his lower half wide open, but there's a huge catch to this strategy. Targon is a seasoned veteran of countless bloodbaths, while Dojin is just a clumsy rookie, a reality made painfully clear when a sweeping polearm strike overpowers his block and sends him tumbling violently across the dirt. Battered and bleeding, our boy seriously doubts he can even get close enough to strike, until the system reminds him that the ogre's heart he just swallowed has pushed his physical limits far beyond a normal human's. And more importantly, Chat AI flashes a grim warning: if he drops the ball here, every single captive gets slaughtered. Pushed to the brink, our hero launches a desperate aggressive charge at Targon, swinging low to clash against the massive orc's downward strike as the system tells him to target the legs. From the sidelines, the spectator orcs are genuinely shocked by the human's raw power. As the weapons violently collide in a burst of sparks, they admit that even with their boss already injured, the kid's talent is nothing to scoff at. But the braided warrior just crosses his arms and confidently declares that the fight is already over. Up close, Targon locks blades with Dojin in a fierce struggle, growling that the borrowed strength of the ogre's heart means absolutely nothing, because at the end of the day, this human is still just a complete rookie. Right on cue, our boy's sneaker catches on the loose dirt, and he loses his balance, falling backward to leave himself wide open to a fatal strike. Targon looms over him with a raised axe, mocking his pathetic lack of actual fighting skills, until Dojin suddenly whips his stolen blade low, slicing a deep gash right into the orc's already injured leg. The massive warrior's eyes widen in shock as he realizes the clumsy misstep was total bait, and even chat AI pings the interface to praise the kid's 200 IQ feint. Our boy wipes the blood from his face, double-checking with the system that his strike actually landed. But as he drops into a defensive crouch, he panics that the shallow scratch didn't do a thing. Chat AI calmly clarifies that beating the massive orc was never the actual plan, because a terrifying new threat has just arrived on the battlefield, the Chan Chan Queen. The interface introduces the three-headed monstrosity, packing 10 times the power of her minions, and drops a crucial piece of lore, revealing that these creatures are uniquely driven by a thirst for revenge. By drawing Targon's blood, Dojin just turned the ruthless warrior into the ultimate bait so they could escape. With the queen completely distracted by the bleeding orc, Dojin screams for the survivors to run, and the group sprints blindly into the dark forest, with Yui struggling to keep up with his frantic pace. Jianwu curses into the night while Leah demands to know where they are even headed, and the heavy-set man snaps at Yui when she tells him to hurry. Suddenly, our hero's eyes widen in shock. He abruptly halts his sprint, prompting Yui to ask what's wrong all of a sudden, but Dojin is too stunned to even finish his sentence, leaving her completely confused. He just points down into the valley, breathlessly announcing that he's found a village, a quiet rustic village ringed by wooden palisades and stone paths. As the battered survivors cautiously approach, a local man peeks out from behind a heavy door, and a woman watches them warily from her window, clearly suspicious of the bloodied strangers. The girls huddle together to whisper that the place is barely big enough to be called a hamlet, while Jianwu takes in the heavy tension, honestly just glad they aren't being attacked on sight. Yui bites her lip, frustrated that they don't even share a language to beg for sanctuary. But inside the largest cabin, Dojin is already sitting across from the village chief, and the old man's eyes widen in disbelief as he listens to the harrowing tale. Still covered in dirt and monster blood, Dojin confirms they barely escaped a brutal orc ambush. The elder's suspicion finally softens into sympathy as he acknowledges the sheer danger of the dark forest. But before officially offering them sanctuary, he has one crucial question, leaning in to pierce right through the young man's exhausted facade. He clarifies that he only needs to know to put his wary villagers' minds at ease. Instantly, a system prompt flashes across Dojin's vision with a strict warning to keep his mouth shut about Earth. Chat AI explains that revealing they're from another world will only paint a massive target on their backs. So our boy thinks fast and lies through his teeth, spinning a tragic story about a slaughtered merchant caravan from across the continent. The chief buys the cover completely and promises to inform the settlement of their circumstances, then kindly asks his guest to stand up, a sudden request that catches Dojin completely off guard. Moments later, the battered survivors are gathered around a large wooden table in the dining hall, where the chief offers them hospitality, where one of the women just collapses onto her arms, completely overwhelmed by the trauma of the past 24 hours. Though Leah tries to keep the mood positive by pointing out that at least this place feels safe, Jianwu isn't ready to drop his guard just yet, and he glares across the table to demand who Dojin really is and how he's pulling off all these miracles, a question our hero smoothly deflects. Yui quickly steps in, snapping at the tattooed man to back off since Dojin is the only reason they aren't orc food, but the heavy-set man ignores the tension entirely, choosing instead to loudly complain about his empty stomach. Another woman turns her attention to the quiet kid sitting at the end of the table, and the boy nervously introduces himself as Heian Yang, a middle schooler who somehow managed to survive the chaos. Before anyone else can speak, the heavy wooden door creaks open, and as the village chief returns with steaming pots of food, Chat AI quietly warns Dojin to let the others eat first, just to be safe. The locals apologize for the meager spread as they serve a thick stew made from hunted birds and root vegetables, prompting Heian to politely invite their host to join them, though the chief just promises to show them to their rooms once they finish. Later that night, the survivors are split into small, rustic guest rooms lit by flickering candles. Leah looks around their cozy space, joking that they only got the VIP treatment thanks to Yui's pretty face. But as the adrenaline finally fades, the crushing weight of the day settles over them both. Yui collapses onto the single wooden bed, declaring she's on the verge of passing out, and when Leah points out the lack of space, Yui is too tired to care, just offering to share the mattress. They exchange quiet goodnights, desperate for a few hours of peace, until Yui's breathing slows as she slips into a deep, exhausted sleep. But her mind offers no rest, plunging her straight into a terrifying nightmare where a roaring orc swings a massive weapon right at her head, before shifting to a bittersweet memory of her mother waving goodbye on a bright, sunny morning. Yui wakes up with a gasp, silent tears streaming down her face as she realizes how far from home she truly is. Beside her, Leah lies wide awake, staring blankly at the wooden ceiling, before she finally closes her eyes, trying to force herself back to sleep. Meanwhile, out in the cold night air, the village chief walks briskly toward the settlement's gates, where a younger local steps out of the shadows to meet him. The old man drops his grandfatherly act instantly, his eyes turning cold as he asks if their guests are finally asleep. The villager nods and confirms the strangers are out cold from their run-in with the horde, and inside the guest house, a massive man draws a jagged dagger and looms right over the resting girls, coldly stating to his hesitant partner that they have absolutely no choice because the orcs won't just let their prey escape and will scour the entire forest for blood. If the horde tracks the survivors here, the entire settlement will be burned to the ground. So to save their own families, the locals must slaughter the sleeping strangers and hang their corpses outside the gates as a gruesome peace offering to ensure the village survives. Leah wakes up in a daze, the quiet of the night shattered, turning to her side only to find Yui lying motionless with a knife buried deep in her chest. Standing right over the bed is the mustached villager, panting with a twisted, satisfied grin. A sight that sends Leah recoiling in horror as she struggles to process the betrayal. Her scream is instantly cut short by a harsh command from across the room, as a crazed villager charges in, yelling that they doomed the entire settlement by bringing the orcs' wrath to their doorstep. Leah cowers on the floor and begs for her life, but the man just lunges forward and slashes his bloody knife down to silence her for good. But right before the blade connects, Jianwu steps in and drops an absolute nuke of a right hook onto the attacker's jaw to save the short-haired girl, roaring at the would-be assassins to back off as he wakes up swinging. Without missing a beat, his tattooed arm snaps up to catch a descending blade right by the wrist, and he effortlessly hoists the large man into the air before slamming him into the dirt to disarm him instantly. A second villager groans on the floor, realizing way too late that they picked the absolute wrong prey. But the blonde brawler doesn't give him a single second to recover, driving a savage punch straight into his face. He just mercilessly rains down blows, leaving his knuckles slick with the criminal's blood. Alerted by the chaos, Dojin and the rest of the survivors burst into the room. Pure panic erupts the second they spot Yui bleeding out on the floor, barely conscious and gasping for air. As a dark pool spreads from her chest, sweating bullets, our guy immediately demands emergency first aid instructions from Chat AI and follows the system's strict orders, throwing his weight onto the injury to stem the massive blood loss. Chat AI confirms the blade was aimed dead at her heart, but miraculously slipped just enough to miss the vital organ. Though the system warns she still won't survive without a supernatural healing potion, Dojin keeps his hands clamped over the injury as the app explains how these magical items work, but when he frantically asks where to find one, the AI hits him with the grim reality that a settlement this small might not have a single drop. Before they can even process that, the village chief steps into the room flanked by armed thugs, casually scolding his men for not killing the guys first. Heian frantically takes over, holding pressure on Yui's chest so our hero can stand up, and when the group screams out to ask why they were betrayed, the old man just sighs in exasperation. He coldly explains that sacrificing these strangers is the only way to appease the enraged orcs, leaving Dojin staring down at him in absolute disbelief that they resorted to murder without even trying to talk it out. But the chief just shrugs off the morality check, tightening his grip on his weapon as he casually admits murder was just the path of least resistance. The thugs hint at the dark reason they live so deep in the woods, and our boy's eyes widen as the horrifying pieces click together. With a deranged glare, an elder reveals they are all exiled criminals with nowhere else to go, boasting that the rest of the survivors have already been massacred in their sleep. With the pleasantries over, the armed thugs draw their blades and charge at Dojin to finish the job, leaving the chief to watch smugly as he assumes his gang of killers will make quick work of a few stranded brats. But Dojin doesn't even flinch, casually snapping a brutal punch into the first attacker's face before calmly asking Chat AI if there are any hidden threats to watch out for. A worry the system quickly dismisses. These guys might be hardened killers, but our hero has consumed an ogre's heart, blasting the next thug backward with a single strike. and he moves with transcended speed to dismantle the rest of the armed men with terrifying ease. He stomps the last attacker straight into the floorboards, only for the AI to ping with a warning that the real surprise is yet to come. Across the room, Jianwu is putting on a clinic of his own, using his raw combat ability to easily overwhelm the treacherous thugs, and he drops them to the floor one by one until the fight is entirely drained out of them. In a matter of seconds, the two survivors stand victorious over a room full of unconscious bodies. Realizing he severely miscalculated, the village chief drops to his knees to beg for his life, and our boy just stares down at him coldly while the system analyzes the sudden shift in tone. It turns out the crafty old man saw that overwhelming display of power and assumed Dojin possesses an awakened trait. The app flashes an image of the ogre's heart, explaining that abilities like this are incredibly rare in this world, which makes our hero a terrifying anomaly to these backwater criminals. The system notes they are out of time, prompting our hero to ask for their next move, and he immediately barks at the terrified chief, making the old man flinch. He demands a healing potion immediately to save Yui's life, and when the elder tries to play dumb about having something so valuable, our guy cuts him off cold. Crouching down, he leverages his assumed status as an awakened to threaten the old man's life, a move that works instantly as the chief frantically admits they actually have a stash. While the elder screams for someone to fetch it, Dojin presses his advantage and demands to know exactly where they can find a genuinely safe haven and reliable information. The elder eagerly points them toward Rundle, a large city just over the mountain, swearing it isn't a den of exiled criminals like this hamlet, and that they can safely rest there. Right on cue, a trembling woman returns from the back room with a small bottle of glowing green liquid. Our boy snatches it up, and the system confirms it's a lowest-grade potion. Not much, but enough to close Yui's fatal wound. Dojin passes on Chatai's instructions to have her drink half and pour the rest directly onto the injury. As they treat her, the chief mutters bitterly from the floor about wasting a valuable resource on a dying girl, and Jianwu immediately silences the old man with a ruthless punch to the face. Dojin glares down at the old man and admits he hated the two-faced bastard from the second they met. Over on the floor, the potion works its magic, and Yui finally sits up as the agonizing pain subsides. When asked if the liquid was just a powerful anesthetic, she admits she doesn't know. But Jianwu gently urges her to her feet, promising that they are finally heading somewhere truly safe. As the survivors prepare to move out, Chat AI chimes in to confirm their destination is the city of Rundle and questions the wisdom of leaving these treacherous villagers alive to cause trouble later. Our hero just looks down at the unconscious chief, completely unbothered. Picturing the incoming horde, Dojin coldly notes that if the old man was right, the orcs will wipe this miserable place off the map by morning anyway. Meanwhile, miles away, the ivy-covered forest is dead quiet under the moonlight, at least until the silence is broken by the rhythmic clatter of wooden wagon wheels. A covered carriage rolls down the dirt path, driven by a muscular, dark-haired swordsman with a blonde priestess sitting beside him. The priestess glances up to note that dawn is finally approaching, and he agrees, clearly relieved that they're almost at Rundle. The swordsman bluntly tells her he can't wait to finally part ways, which sparks an immediate argument. The priestess fires back, taking a shot at his stagnant rank as a mere sword expert. Annoyed, she abruptly orders him to pull the carriage over, and playfully mocks his total cluelessness about women while he just grumbles in frustration. Meanwhile, Dojin's group arrives at the outskirts of a massive walled medieval city. Looking down at Rundle from a nearby ridge while wrapped in stolen cloaks to blend in, he pulls back his hood to confirm they've finally found their safe haven, and the sheer scale of the place leaves the survivors awestruck and desperate for some real rest. But Dojin's eyes narrow as he analyzes the entrance, spotting armed guards strictly checking identification papers for everyone passing through the gates, and the heavy-set man points out the obvious: without permits, they'll be thrown straight into a dungeon. While they wait in the tree line, Yui tries to lighten the mood by joking about posting her stab wound on social media, which prompts Chat AI to suggest Dojin check on her recovery. He walks right up and bluntly asks to inspect the injury, and Yui instantly goes on the defensive, demanding to know why he needs to see it. Completely oblivious to normal social cues, our boy just stares in genuine confusion, until the flustered girl finally yells that the wound is right on her chest. Dojin awkwardly apologizes and turns away while she calls him a psycho from a distance, and the system notes that her energetic reaction means she's physically fine. Still, the AI warns that nearly dying at her age is bound to leave some lasting trauma, but Dojin pushes the awkwardness aside to ask if there is truly no conventional way through those gates. The system confirms that Rundle's strict security requires proper identification, warning that if the group gets caught trying to slip past the guards as undocumented strangers, there's no telling what the punishment will be, prompting our hero to stop in his tracks as a much more drastic plan forms in his head. Deeper in the woods, the blonde priestess steps away from her carriage for a moment of quiet, but she suddenly gasps as a rustle in the brush catches her off guard. Nearby, her dark-haired bodyguard rests his hands on a massive broadsword, completely oblivious, and grumbles to himself about the sheer annoyance of being stalled right outside the city gates. His frustration instantly turns to alarm when he looks back to find our boy cloaked in a hood, holding the holy woman hostage at swordpoint. Chat AI absolutely panics, flashing urgent warnings that this reckless kidnapping is a terrible idea. The system drops the lore that his new hostage is a priest of the Karman faith, meaning threatening her is a one-way ticket to divine retribution. But Dojin completely tunes the app out to casually address the heavily armed guard, while the AI scolds him for using a stolen village sword to commit a felony. Ice cold, my guy just asks the swordsman exactly how many people can fit in the back of their ride. The dark-haired expert answers confidently, hefting his massive slab of iron onto his shoulder to state he has a question of his own. Realizing the hero isn't going to back down from this standoff, the system lets out a digital sigh and agrees to run combat support, just as the bodyguard charges forward with terrifying speed, challenging Dojin to see whose blade is faster as he closes the gap for a lethal strike. The dark-haired swordsman doesn't even blink at the hostage situation, casually challenging our hero to see whose blade is faster. Dojin keeps his katana pressed tight against the blonde priestess's neck, telling Jianwu to keep his weapon ready, and warns his ally not to dare take his eyes off their enemy. But the swordsman locks onto his target with zero hesitation, and in a sudden blur of motion, he thrusts his massive broadsword straight forward without a single care for the hostage. The sheer kinetic pressure of the attack catches Dojin completely off guard, hitting him so hard it instantly knocks the wind out of his lungs. The swordsman follows up with a massive upward slash that launches our boy and his hostage straight into the air. But Dojin manages to flip backward and stick the landing to buy himself some distance. The dark-haired swordsman just watches the movement, his suspicions confirmed, and points out that the teen has zero defenses against aura, leaving our hero completely confused. He condescendingly explains that it's the inner energy warriors forged from mana, mocking Dojin for holding a weapon without knowing the basics. Then, deciding he's wasted enough breath on a common bandit, he brings his broadsword down for a lethal execution strike, only for our boy to suddenly block the heavy hit with his stolen katana. The dark-haired swordsman's eyes go wide with shock, and as sparks shower from their locked weapons, he realizes this kid is packing some unnatural strength. Dojin strains under the weight of the Buster sword, hit with the sudden realization that he's up against a true awakened, so he quickly pings Chat AI for his odds of winning, only for the system to confirm they are still terrible. The system casually drops that this bodyguard is on par with Targon, which makes our hero wonder if the orc was using aura too. The AI confirms it as Dojin launches a desperate thrust, noting that he just didn't have the stats to see the energy back then, and bluntly warns our boy that he is completely outclassed in raw power. But the app pulls up a quick replay of him slicing open the orc vice chief's leg, reminding him that he doesn't need to be stronger if he fights smart. Taking the hint, our guy drops his weight into a heavy downward slash, but the dark-haired swordsman catches the blade like it's nothing. He coldly observes that this bandit is physically strong but fundamentally weak, assuming the teen must have stolen his awakened status just like he steals everything else, and swings his massive greatsword to finish the job. But before the steel can connect, a blinding flash erupts right between them, locking the bodyguard in place with a glowing golden aura. Our boy is caught in the exact same magical bind as the blonde priestess steps forward with her hand outstretched, commanding them both to stand down. The bodyguard angrily questions why she's stopping him, but his boss simply orders him to load the attackers into her carriage. This sudden turn of events leaves Dojin's companions completely baffled as they rush out of the dark woods. Outside the coach, Garen urgently warns her that these thugs just aimed for her life, but the blonde priestess just smiles calmly from the window, insisting that everything is perfectly fine. Sometime later, the carriage approaches the grand, fortified city of Rundle, a massive safe zone where guards strictly verify the identification of anyone trying to enter. Riding alongside the carriage, Garen admits he can never figure the blonde priestess out. While inside the cabin, the survivors listen anxiously to the muffled voices, completely lost thanks to the language barrier. The swordsman argues that these thugs just tried to kill her, but she playfully asks if he was worried, teasing him about catching feelings and causing the stoic bodyguard to groan in frustration. Their banter is cut short at the gates when two city guards step up to demand identification, prompting the holy woman to flash her religious status to bypass the checkpoint. The guard isn't buying it, suspiciously demanding to know what's inside the carriage as he barks in order to pull back the curtain. But inside, Dojin completely ignores the rising tension to map out a 3-step survival plan. Step 1 is rest, as he sees how exhausted Yui and the others are and knows a safe place to sleep is the top priority, while Step 2 is gathering information because even his system-fed knowledge has its limits. And while Jianwu complains about their itchy disguises, Chat AI chimes in with the final step: get stronger or die on this continent. Yui whispers that she can't hear a single thing happening past the carriage walls, so our boy decides their best bet for gathering intel is tracking down an adventurer's guild, a thought that prompts the system to crack a meta joke about his webtoon reading habits, though it confirms the guild is the perfect spot for rumors. But before he can plan any further, the blonde priestess peeks in to give them the all-clear, and Dojin finally steps out of the stuffy cabin. The sunlight hits them as they take in the bustling, massive city of Rundle. Yui and the other survivors look around in absolute awe at the medieval metropolis, while the blonde priestess smiles in relief that her dangerous bluff actually worked. Dojin approaches her to apologize for the whole hostage situation, and genuinely thanks her for getting them past the gates. The holy woman humbly waves it off, claiming it is simply God's will to help those in need, but Garen watches from the sidelines with his arms crossed, muttering that he still absolutely hates this kid. The blonde priestess asks our boy what his crew plans to do next, prompting him to ping Chat AI to debate if they should drop the whole otherworldly truth bomb. They quickly agree to keep their cards close to their chest since they still don't fully trust her, so he just gives her a vague brush-off about needing to gather some local intel. Taking the hint, the holy woman points them straight toward the city's Adventurers Guild, which Dojin figures is the perfect spot to hunt for other stranded passengers, even if his webtoon logic warns him it's never actually that easy. With their business finally wrapped up, our hero thanks the duo one last time and leads his cloaked group of survivors down the bustling street, officially setting off on their own. Garen and the blonde priestess watch them disappear into the crowd, confirming the kids are finally out of their hair, before the priestess turns to her bodyguard to announce that their own escort contract is officially complete. The dark-haired swordsman agrees that the short trip was actually pretty fun, tossing up a casual wave without even looking back as the two part ways for good. Meanwhile, at a grand Gothic church in the city, an older priest stands near the altar, welcoming someone back inside. He addresses the new arrival as Priestess Elion, and as she walks down the aisle to tell Priest Thomas her news, the old man interrupts, revealing he's already received a divine oracle, knowing that the people who crossed over from another world have finally arrived. He notes that the prophesied event has begun and asks for their location, but Elion calmly states they are heading to the Adventurers Guild, telling the priest not to worry. Down on the city streets, a spear tip is suddenly thrust right at our hero's throat. A city guard glares at him, announcing that backup has already been called, and accuses the group of entering Rundle without identity verification. But worse, the guard declares them the prime suspects in the Shiram village massacre, placing our boy under arrest while Chat AI pings with a rare admission. Even it didn't see this coming. As Priestess Elion's words echo about their fate being sealed from the start, the group finds themselves boxed in by a wall of armed guards, and with spear tips pressing against their necks, the system delivers a grim verdict. They are heading to the infamous Rundle dungeon, and there is no way to survive.